All right, welcome back. Let's move
Right.
on.
Okay. 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 So integrated pest management, and I think I've kind of already talked a lot about that when the questions that I got for um, controlling the various plants like blackberry and French broom. But it's basically this idea where um, the concept that the sum of um, is greater than the parts, right? So your strength of using different methods of control can actually make the control a lot sounder and hopefully a lot better than if you were to just rely on one way of control. And a lot of times there is only one way, but trying to have multiple ways and looking at the different ways that we can control it's the first I gotta say this. It's really important, right? And always trying to think about all the different ways because, like I said, you just can't focus on one. Um, so way um, when I go out and I look at a site, I I basically I want to know what's working, what's not working. Like that one particular site that I showed with all of the horseweed that had come in. It's like, why did that happen? Like what happened to produce that result, right? So that was obviously not a good thing. We don't want to do that again. Um, so just being mindful in monitoring, right? So going back out and looking at these sites, and that was how they caught that problem was they went out to see the results of their planting to see how the seedlings were looking, and they saw that the trees were dead, and then they attributed it to the weeds that had come in. So monitoring for invasive plants really smart. um oh, oops, sorry. So there's four, should go back. There's really four that I call, and in this case, I guess they four different modes of attack. You've got biological, chemical, cultural, and then I call physical. I don't see physical on here, but that's probably they've had that lumped into the cultural. So chemical, and I kind of lumped the herbicide talk into the integrated pest management talk because it just made sense. I didn't want to call it out separately because it is one of the tools in the toolbox. Okay, chemical a lot of times is super effective. There are different types of herbicides or pesticides. They're regulated by Department of Pesticide Regulation. Label is the law. Uh, and you have to apply it with thought. Looking back at that example of the horseweed, that was basically came in because everything else was taken out and not really thinking, maybe it's good to have a little plant cover in there. Um, so it is one of the tools of the IPM. There are organic and synthetic types of herbicide. It still has a label. It's still considered an herbicide, even if it's organic. Organic herbicides tend to be oils like orange oil or some sort of an oil that burns the plant. Okay, and they the there's a lot of issues with organic herbicides. I've tried to use them, and the biggest one is that they're not systemic, which is one of the beautiful things about an herbicide is that it tends to go through the whole plant and doesn't just burn off the outer part. So, but there are organic and synthetics. Another tool in integrated pest management is biological. Here's some goats. You could use other animals gosh, you could use the cattle if you wanted them to trample plants. If you had small seedlings of French broom, you could put the cattle out there and they would probably take care of that pretty quickly because the seedlings are at that stage are pretty vulnerable when they're very tiny. But here's some goats. Goats are super popular nowadays. Physical. This is a good picture because this is what a lot of the Tubbs Fire area looks like right now. It's just it's very sad. It was a former oak woodland that's now 100% broom. Difficult. They're getting rid of the biomass here. This is, like I said, getting rid of the biomass. They're pulling it out, and then they'll have to go and go back in and treat it with the herbicide. Cultural. Here we've got burning. We've got mulching. And, oh, my favorite slide again, cultural. This kind of shows how the mulching is actually helping to prevent, and had that burn not happened, those seeds would have been suppressed. However, I wouldn't think that they would be suppressed that long because at some point that mulch would break down. So choosing the right method. Okay, this is important here. This is the glass fire again. This is that property above Calistoga where he had 100% broom infestation after the fire. Didn't even know the plants were there, but the seed was lying in wait. And the heat induced germination through scarification. And now you've got all these trees. So when I came out to this property, because I knew the property beforehand, it was like I was horrified, and I knew that I had about 3 years max window before these plants got big enough for producing viable seeds. So I had that window to try to treat those plants so that I could hopefully eradicate this forever. I was going to use the glass fire to my advantage as far as reducing this particular plant, which he would never have been able to ever get rid of because he always had that seed in the ground. And now he had it all, it's all germinating. And so you can actually have 100% control using burning and using herbicide in conjunction for broom. So try to take that to advantage. It was difficult not being on the property living on the property. I think if this was my property, I would have been able to do a little bit better at monitoring. So it was just when I was able to go down there, and I went down there several times each year to try to monitor and then spot treat anything that was coming back. So you have to look at, again, what is the plant, your target plant, and what is the time frame that you have. In this case, I had 3 years. And then some other considerations. And this was somebody's question, or they wanted me to talk about it on the questionnaire, but a sensitive habitat, sensitive areas like vineyards, and you need to think about all of that as well. So, and I had to think about that specifically here because I was in Napa County. Let's see. Limitations. This is the glass fire. This is on the Angwin side of things. And this is actually Glass Mountain. So there's some limitations with trying to do any sort of treatment in this property, because at some point in time, I'm sure invasive plants would get here as well. Okay. So limitations with chemicals, herbicides, a sensitive region is Napa Valley, and I had to be really thoughtful about what herbicide I use. There's an herbicide that's triclopyr or Garlon that is really, you can use near watercourses, and that was a sensitive habitat on the property, and I could not go in there with the herbicide that I was wanting to use, so I wanted to use triclopyr. Well, triclopyr sadly is very volatile, and grapes are super sensitive to triclopyr, and they can actually be affected from miles away. So I didn't want to go anywhere near that. And so I had to change the herbicide mix that I did, and I wasn't able to go into the creeks and treat the infestation in the creek. And I had to try to do that by hand, which was very difficult and not successful. So I had to look at location, timing again, and the target species. So I don't have a specific slide talking about like sensitive areas, but if you have, okay, I do have an example, really good example on this particular property. There was a few rare plants in the same family, the legume family. They were called the Napa false indigo. And I had issues with that because the crew that I had was not super discern. They were not able to necessarily discern the difference between what's a French broom and then what's a Napa indigo when they were that small, because they do look so similar. So I located all of those particular plants and I did a hand pull around there. And then I flagged it like crazy. And then I showed the crew and I said, you're not going in here. And then I made sure that I dealt with the invasive plants surrounding that sensitive plant. I did it without an herbicide and I just did it by hand. It was much easier. You can do it in small scale. You could do manual release. So that's one of the ways that I dealt with sensitive habitat, or other ways that I've dealt with it. If it's a bulb, you have to think about timing. Is it going to be up and producing in the summer, and then is it going to be died? It's going to be died back in the winter. So then you can do like your mastication work then, and you won't have any effect on that. So looking at also the rare plant that you're dealing with, what is its biology, and trying to kind of work around each one. Okay. So, here's a good example of timing. This is stinkwort, and this is that awful little plant that grows along the highway because the county misses the timing every year. They could go out again and catch this at a later time, and then it would reduce the spread because it's all up and down all of the highways in Sonoma County, Napa County. Target species. So here is there is broom. Can everybody see my my mouse? That is a Scotch broom. We were talking about the difference. That's a Scotch broom, and then back there that might be French broom. But knowing what plants that you're trying to deal with. In this case, on this property, I had to do an herbicide prescription to try to deal with this particular plant. Target species in this case is an annual species, so it's already there, and spraying it would have been ridiculous to do after it's already there because it's already going to die back. It lives its whole lifespan in 1 year. So really, with annuals, you want to make sure that you're stopping them from germinating in the first place. So this one was a challenge. I think that we actually, on this case, tried to encourage other planting of other native species to kind of take up space. And this erigeron, the horseweed, really wanted to have that bare mineral soil. And so if you could take that bare mineral soil away and put other desirable plants on there, even if they weren't necessarily trees, that would reduce these horseweeds from coming in. And then with the the broom, it was just the typical. I just did glyphosate, or I think I did glyphosate because there was a vineyard up there. Okay, biological issues. Oh yes, lots of issues here. It's kind of the new fad, and I think that's maybe one of the reasons why it drives me crazy is because everybody wants to get in on this and thinks it's really the greatest thing, and it does. There's a lot of advantages with goats. Like I said, I mean, they'll eat a lot of things. They'll eat things like berries. They can get in there and really do some good work. But there's a lot of issues. Containment is the first one. We all see this along the road in the summer. We've got the herd of goats, and they're moving along and they're doing the treatment, and you're hoping that they don't. I'm always afraid I'm going to see one on the highway, like got out, but I haven't seen that yet, but I'm sure it's happened. Predators. So that, got to think about that. Okay. So this is the timing and target species. So we talk about annuals and how treating an annual after they've already gone through the life cycle is not necessarily smart. This was a huge project, spent a lot of money on trying to get goats here to reduce the fuels in October. Okay. And it was a lot of money. So it's October and the rains are coming in a month, right? And the seed bank is already there because the seeds have already dropped from these annual. There's different grasses and there's probably some star thistle and stuff in there. But the point is that you've only got 1 month of protection or fuels reduction from the goats because the rainy season's coming. And really, the goats should have been in there in the spring before the seeds set. So getting rid of the problem for the whole summer season and hopefully reducing the seed bank for the following season because they never were able to set seed because they were eaten. So being thoughtful again about what it is you're trying to do. They also could be eating plants that you don't want them to eat. Okay. This is a big one for me, and I don't know. Hopefully the people that are have these goats are thinking about this is that, you don't want to help spread this, invasive seeds by bringing goats in without letting them at least having an, being able to, basically they're not taking your bad seed that they've just ingested and going somewhere else and then pooping on somebody else's property. So you need to have some sort of a containment pen for them so that you're not spreading the seed. So it's perfect. It's fertilized and everything. This so true is not systemic. The goats are only eating the material that's above ground, but they're not actually getting the material below ground. And so you'll just see resprouting of things that are, perennials and hardwoods. They'll just resprout. The annuals, like I said, they're dead and gone. It doesn't matter, but you're not going to really see the results. Example along Highway 101, and I laughed, they had goats along there and they've got fennel, which is an invasive plant, and it just resprouted. The goats actually didn't even eat it. They didn't really want to eat it, but they did eat some of it, and it just looks the same as it did last year. Okay, so moving on to physical limitations. So obviously, physical limitations, it's really, see, it's costly, it's costly, labor intensive. And yeah, I mean, a lot of times it's appropriate in areas where you do have sensitive environments or you have a small scale where you can deal with it because it's just a small area. But on a large scale, that photo right here, that's a group of volunteers, and that's great, but it's just not really, I don't know, I feel like it's not really practical in large scale by hand. Okay, now if you have mechanical equipment, yeah, of course it's more practical. But so here we go, we've got some more volunteers, which is great. I think it's a great way to get out and get people to enjoy the environment and to kind of appreciate. It is a good thing, but it is expensive and timely. It's not, you can't always do it in every single area. This is ice plant here. This is a good example. Looking up the cliffs up and down, volunteers are out there pulling ice plant, which is great, except for they can't get over the edge. And then ice plant falls into the ocean, drifts down, washes up on another beach, and then establishes at another area. So poor access. My favorite slide again, poor access. Like there's no way if there was a plant growing in that shelf, I would be able to get it. And mechanical, physical is not systemic. So cutting back sprouts is not going to work. Basically the tree's reserve carbohydrate system is just going to resprout right back. So here's some oaks after one of the fires resprouting. So you can go ahead and cut them back and then they'll just keep on growing. So takes a long time. and is not going to be effective. There's the laurel. This landowner was cutting back the laurels every year and they were growing right back. So what we did in this case was we treated the laurels. We didn't treat all of the laurels because I didn't want to take it out of the, I didn't want to take it off the site. I mean, it's a native plant, but it was just the whole hillside was full of it. And so we treated about every other one with a hack and squirt. So they took an axe and then they actually hacked into the stem as long as it was an inch or greater. And then they just have a little spray bottle with 100% imazapyr and 1 milliliter. Boom. It was still very difficult to kill. Some of them did not fully die, and so that was okay because the goal was still to keep it on site. But again, it was expensive at this point because it took 2 people to pull apart a plant of that size. So had that plant not been allowed to get to that size, we could have used a foliar, the same chemical, but we could have used foliar and it would have probably been a little bit more effective. Okay, some cultural limitations of burning and mulching as examples. See this a lot is chip piles, and chip piles are good if they're not very deep. And I know a lot of contracts with fuels reduction contracts with like EQIP or CFIP will actually have limits on how deep on average these can be, because at some point they are not going to break down and they burn very easily. And a chip pile is really difficult to put out if it catches on fire. And then here, right in this picture, you'll see that that's not good for that particular tree to put all of those chips. You just don't want to do that. You don't want to bury the tree. Another thing that's bad about chips and mulch is that a lot of plants actually do need to have that bare mineral soil that a fire will provide. So, knowing, what are your goals? Like if you have a fuels break, then you're going to want to do the mastication and the chips and do all that. But if you're outside of that area, you may not do that. And here's some example. This is a really pretty lupin. I've got a little story to tell you about this lupin. This is a rare plant. It's beautiful. It's got a beautiful leaf. The flower's pretty too, but it's just got like the edges of the leaf are kind of revoluted and they're just gorgeous. And it is a legume, same family as the French broom. And like I said earlier, legumes have a really long lasting seed bank that are fire induced. And I found this plant, several different plants after the glass fire growing in areas that they were not previously growing before because it was a forest. And obviously it needs to have, this plant needs to have full sun. It's like an early invader. So the seed had probably been in the forest soil for probably 100 years, 70 years. And finally had that sunlight and that heat-induced scarification in order to germinate. So you had all of these beautiful plants. They're also called fire followers. This one on the right is Baker's globe mallow, which is in the hibiscus family, and that was all over the place after the Mendocino fire up in Anthony Peak. And then grasses too, the California fescue there down in the center, that needs to have bare mineral soil. So you're basically not going to be, you're going to be excluding those from the environment if you cover it all in mulch. And mulch isn't good for everything, geophytes and bulbs and things like that. This is not really a great photo. I took this yesterday. This is a manzanita. It's not a very nice looking manzanita, but we never really think about it. But sometimes what you have growing there already is acting as a suppressant. So there's broom. You could see the broom on the lower left-hand side coming in, and it's not able to get into the forest because you've got too much shade and you've already got something physically there in its way. So if if, this person was to go ahead and to try and do a fuel break or something here, they need to be thinking about the broom. And maybe if I'm not prepared to deal with the monster that's going to come into this area right away, maybe I'm just going to leave it as it is. And I mean, this is a super high fire danger, so I probably wouldn't, I'd want to deal with that. But just recognizing that you've got this scary monster just below that's wanting to invade into the forest. And it happens all the time. Once that material is removed for a fuels reduction project, other things will come right in, and it's sometimes worse than what you had before. Okay, prescribed burning. Some issues there. So this is a prescribed burn that I got to participate on, and I work with a landowner, and it took a lot of planning. It was so much planning. I had so many people out there, how to get the engine in so that they could have water, how trying to find a good day where we can get all of the people out at once. The smoke management plan. Is it a burn day? There's so many, it's not easy. And I love burning. Prescribed burning is really great. But in this case, and I was well aware of the broom that was already there. So I was prepared to deal with it. But a lot of times, if you don't know, then you're making the problem worse. Oh, there's my favorite slide again. This was that same prescribed burn because I was ready for it. And I was ready for the French broom to come back. Okay. That's my best, or that's my integrated pest management. Patty, is there questions?
We're back to the bay sprouts.
Okay, let me go to my bay sprouts.
Okay.
It inspires me to talk.
All right. I reduce bay to a single stem and then let the deer eat the resprouts at the base. Still experimenting. Have you tried?
Yeah, this landowner had done that. She had cut back all of her to one, thinking that the others weren't going to sprout, and they did. And they didn't necessarily, the deer weren't going for it. There's other plants there that the deer wanted to eat. They do like laurel, but I feel like they don't attack it on a wide scale. Like you'll see a few plants that they're chewing on and have shaped, but it's not like they're going after every single laurel. But if it works, then I would say do it. And if you're willing to put the time in, it's fine. Yeah.
Okay. For bay sprouts, a mazapir or try
Cyclopyr?
Clivopyr, thank you.
Oh, I would do a mazapir. I think it's a really good for hardwoods.
And is that over the counter or is it restricted?
It's not restricted. That's a good question, and I meant to talk about that when we were talking about herbicides, is that all of these herbicides you can go to the store and buy, and but generally they're not necessarily in the same formulation. Like it's just not as concentrated, but you can buy this stuff Amazon. But I would recommend having somebody professional to apply it, because there are so many, you just really have to know what to do if something goes wrong. You read the label, understand the label, wear the appropriate PPE. What happens if you get it in your eye? Are you prepared? So hiring a professional is always really good. But if you just got your own plant, then just making sure that you understand the risks and that you do have the PPE, and the label will tell you what you need to wear. Getting an herbicide prescription is also kind of a good idea if you're able to which kind of sums up all of the things that we talked about. Are there bees in the area? That's something that we need to think about, because some of these herbicides can be harmful to bees. And if you've got somebody that's a beekeeper right next door, then you might not want to use certain herbicides. So anyways, just wanted to throw that out there. But imazapyr is a good one. And I just recently was at a continuing education. I need to do a lot of that for that particular license that I have. And they do have this really cool don't know what I did with that. Oh, just 1 minute. There is a new, oh gosh, it's like an injector tube that has preloaded imazapure in a cartridge, and so you don't have any exposure at all to the imazapure if you use it. And it's already comes preloaded with, I think it's 1 milliliter, and they were using it for tree of heaven, which is a really bad tree, and it only works on trees that have a really thin bark. And so I think early stages like these resprouting laurels have really thin. It's called an easy jet lance. So trees greater than 1.5 inch diameter, and they were injecting it every 4 inches. And so that's a really, I was totally intrigued. I was like, this is great. Like, you don't have to really worry about any sort of contamination or getting exposed with that. So you should look into that. The Easy Jet.
Great. Okay. Those are all the questions we have for now.
Okay.
You want to move on to the next section?
Yeah, and then my next section isn't going to be long, so we're going to be done early. I hope that's okay.
Of course.
Okay.
This is great information. Thank you.
Yeah, there is so much information. Putting this together was not it wasn't easy, and I know there's things I've probably forgotten to mention, but hopefully people ask questions. Okay, so now we're going to jump to a completely different category, and that's just road best management practices. And in some ways, I guess it does relate back to invasive plant spread and such, but it's just trying to be a better steward of the environment. So roads are the #1 contributor to poor water quality. They've just done a lot of research. There was a big push that, forestry was causing clear cuts and so forth were the main instigators for erosion, and they did a lot of monitoring of what, after timber harvest, and where was the dirt coming from? It was actually coming from roads. And I work a lot. When I do timber harvest plans, we need to do a lot of work on roads because they are, every property has roads. This is a culvert that is not super great, functioning really well. This is outside of Lake County after the ranch fire. Well, I guess it's the Mendocino complex fire, the same fire that went all the way up to Anthony Peak. So why do we care? Like I said, just, best management practices relating to forest roads, they are the most critical practices to influence impacts on the environment. And here, this picture just tells 1,000 words. And I really do wish that this was something that every child learned about, is just trying to be a better steward of the environment. What would a raindrop do? And that was really helpful for me when I'm, out in the woods and I'm trying to figure out, what should I do to reduce erosion here? Where should I put a water bar? What would a raindrop do if it fell? Well, this is what it does. And you've got this bare soil that's totally exposed. It's a through cut, meaning that there's no place for the water to really drain off. So it drains right down the road. Okay, real quick here. Here's my link. I always want to give you the links. It's for handbook for forest and ranch rural roads. This is the Mendocino County RCD helped put this together, and it's a Bible for forest landowners. And I think it's free, and you could just check it out. Super helpful. Okay, so what would a raindrop do? Well, there's a lot of energy in a raindrop. Okay, the kinetic energy. Let's see. I remember this brought back nightmares of my hydrology class in college. So we had to do a lot of equations, but there's a lot of kinetic energy in a raindrop. And when you have a lot of them, it's very powerful, as we all know, with all the floods. But in this case, Kinetic energy is EK. The mass of the raindrop is MD, and the terminal velocity is the VD. So there's a lot of energy if you were to go ahead and try to run that equation. Let's see. So why do we do it, right? Well, obviously we don't want that at all. That's terrible because, well, I'm not going to be able to drive on it. I'm going to fall into that hole. But also, where's that water going? It looks like it's going all the way down here, and you're at the top of a drainage of somewhere, and that soil is all lost. That's soil that should stay on site. You know, think of the Dust Bowl or a tremendous amount of soil that was lost in that case through the wind. But here it's through water. And then where does it go? Well, it just goes down through the creeks, settles into areas where maybe salmon want to build a redd, or it goes out into the ocean. It's just a loss. We can't drive. There's no traction, reduced water quality. This is a Usall Road up in Mendocino County, and it's a road that is a county road does not have a lot of maintenance, and it's not blocked off in the winter. It's not a permanent road. It's not rocked. And so you've got deep ruts, and it's people getting stuck. And I think part of they want to do that, right? A lot of people like to go four-wheel driving, but it's just not really good for the road and the environment. So how do we become better stewards of our roads? Okay. Well, to avoid the previous slide is not driving on roads that don't have a solid surface. So you shouldn't be driving on a road that isn't rocked or pavement if it's really bad weather. You know, when we put together timber harvest plans, and we talk about doing timber harvesting in the winter, one of the caveats is that we cannot have vehicles on the road if they cannot function, if they have to be put into four-wheel drive. You know, if you need to go into four-wheel drive, then you shouldn't be on the road. So rocking permanent roads, it's not cheap, obviously, but you know, if it's a road that you're using all the time and you have to use it, then you should be rocked. And rocking basically is helpful. You still need to do other types of drainage features. Having gates, and a lot of people complain about gates out in the forest. I can't get out there. Well, the reason they don't want, you know, their roads to look like that. So that's why I don't go in around gates, don't break locks. I don't, not that any of you guys would do this, but that's why they have gates out there. And if you don't want people on your property, put a gate up. If you don't want them to be, a lot of times people will sneak through your property or because they want to ride their dirt bikes. Okay, drainage structures. Even on like a gravel road, you still need to be kind of thoughtful about what would that drop of water do when it hits the ground? And you kind of have to think about, I'm a drop of water. Where am I going to go? Okay, so we have what's called rolling dips on like kind of the larger mainline roads that are rocked. So you can get road or water off the road, or you can have water bars. And this is from the current forest practice rules, and I snipped that out of there. And basically, the distance between your water bars is dependent upon the hazard or the erosivity of the soil and the slope. So the steeper the slope, the closer together your water bars need to be. And if you have soils that are really highly erosive, which most of the time they are, you're going to want to have them closer together. So the water, you want to get water off the road as quickly as possible. The longer time the water is on your road, it's picking up soil, it's picking up your road, and it's taking it away. So you just want to escort it off with this water bar, and usually you want to put it onto an area. Where is that water going to go? You want to put it onto some place there's organic matter so that it settles in. And that's not always easy in a lot of areas because a lot of times these roads are right next to creeks, and then you're basically dumping this water right into creeks. So that's not good either. So there's another reason to have your roads rocked, and then you don't have to necessarily have as many water bars. Bringing a shovel, there's a forester named Jack Sweeley. just he would come and talk at our licensed foresters association meetings, and he would always, the first thing he always said is that every good forester has a shovel in his car, because you can fix small little things before they become big. You know, it's kind of like pulling up that one simple little stinkwort that you saw in the forest before it becomes a problem. You can have a plugged culvert, or you can have a water bar that somebody drove over when it was wet, and now the water isn't going along where it's supposed to. Now it's going back onto the treads and eroding your road. So if you have a shovel, you can do a lot with a shovel. So just having a shovel around, and just as you see the need, repairing things. Culverts with that shovel, clearing out the obstructions. This is kind of an extreme case that I feel like a shovel isn't going to work on, but this it would. Okay. You could clear that out. And because if the culvert plugs, then what happens is then you're going to have that. The water's going to go around it, over it. Those are kind of some extreme slides, but having appropriately sized culverts, a lot of times our culverts are undersized. Thinking, oh, that, you know, we normally don't get a lot of rain. Well, all it takes is that one storm. And I think that we've seen that in Sonoma County and in just everywhere where we've been getting these really terrible rains. And there's a lot of water, and there's a lot of power in water. And the bigger your culvert, the better, because you're basically allowing that water to flow and protect your road. The other reason why you want to have a bigger culvert is that you're going to have material getting caught up in it. And if your culvert is too small, it can easily get plugged. And then when it gets plugged, it gets blown out. And then you've got a real problem like this right here. It looks like it eroded the fill around it. This is kind of, this is like not really practical, right? But it kind of just really shows how the strength of water, and how it just took out that highway. Something bad. Okay, so this is the Tom Graham slide. I wish I could have taken a picture of all of his roads that he had, but you really just want to have the minimum amount of roads that are necessary. You know, you don't, there's no need to have a road to go here or to go there. If you can do it all in one road, just minimizing that minimizes the impacts on the ground. It minimizes the amount of time that you have to spend out there maintaining the road. It just does a lot. And just really being thoughtful about road placement. Probably none of you are out there looking to build roads, but knowing that if you do have a lot of roads, maybe you don't need to use all of those roads. And then the ones that you want to use year round, you have those as permanent roads that are either rocked. And the ones that you don't want to use, then just don't use them in the winter. And then you'll just reduce your erosion potential. So minimizing road. Okay, so that was it. I put my contact information there so you guys can reach out if you want. But I'll be taking questions again. You can take questions for everything, and then also for the road section.
Okay. Here we have the atmospheric rivers we've had these last few years causes slides along our road banks. The loss of trees also seems to have made the road banks less stable. I haven't had success trying to reseed these banks because they are so steep and the soil is poor. What can we do to encourage new growth and reduce erosion of this kind? And what are the pros and cons of hydroseeding? What does it cost? Are there mixtures that are native seeds?
Oh gosh, I've never hydroseeded. I don't think that what they're seeding with is native seed. And I'm sure that they have, let's see, I'm sure they have native hydroseeding. Yeah, trees are beneficial, but they can also put so much weight on those steepened banks. So it's a lot of times it's good that the trees aren't there, and sometimes it's good when they are there. But if the trees are gone and they've been taking out, the thing with the hydro seeding, you've just got like small annuals in there, and it'd be good to have something with a little bit more substance. But obviously, if you can't reach it, then you're going to have to use something that you can spread that way with the hydro seed. Without really seeing it, it's kind of hard to say, but driving along like River Road and looking at what's growing on the cliffs there's a lot of perennial plants that do a pretty good job of holding the side of the cliff up, and not pampas grass. Pampas grass is really, really bad. So if you've got that, you should try to get rid of that grass. But the one I'm thinking of is orange monkey flower, and that's a good perennial. It's got a good little root system that would help kind of grow on the side of these slopes. But just be really careful of not getting any invasive plants there. So it's probably not a great answer. Sorry.
Okay, the next one is, can you talk about best practices for treating coyote brush post-fire? The brush is encroaching into the coastal prairie. For example, cut the top, kill, and create burn piles, then treat the new growth with herbicide.
Oh yeah, I just saw a really great slideshow on this up in Humboldt County where that it is doing that. And I'm trying to think of what it is that they did. I don't think that they treated it with herbicide. I think they used like animals to work on that. But yeah, there was burning involved. I think you could burn, you could cut and you could burn, and then maintaining that is the big thing by having burns on a regular basis, because your coyote brush is just going to continue to come in. So if you can just get rid of that parent plant and then maintaining that open nature by burning, that would be the thing to do. And so however it is that you decided to get rid of that plant, like if you were to cut it and burn it, or to have something eat it, goats eat it or herbicide it, as long as you maintain that open nature, which is through fire. And then the fire would also bring in the native grasses that are going to be a really good mulch and not allow the coyote brush to kind of come in as easily as it was before.
Okay, do we have any other questions? Oh, any advice on treating poison hemlock, again, post-fire?
Hey, look, poison hemlock. I just wrote a prescription on that because I think I wrote a prescription. What did I do? Give me 1 second here. No. I thought I had written a prescription. Okay, so I did have a landowner who had cattle, and had some cows died from the hemlock. And hemlock is a biennial, and so you need to think about its growth. And you've got that the rosette stage, and then when it bolts. So if you can treat it, you can treat it with an herbicide. I have to look it up, but because it's a biennial, it's a little bit separate process. So you want to catch it before it bolts. So you're probably going to have multiple generations out there. So you'll have ones that are going to bolt the next year and ones that have already bolted. And so when if you can get them before they bolted, that would be ideal. But it's going to be a combination of he was going to have to hand pull, and he was going to have to spray. He was going to use herbicide on I think he was going to use herbicide on the one that hadn't bolted yet, and then he was going to hand pull the ones that were already shot up, and wearing gloves because it is really toxic. So, but that's a good example of integrated pest management. And then making sure that you don't let that stuff compost in a spot where anybody's going to get into it.
So going back to coyote brush, somebody put goats like coyote brush. They especially like to strip the bark. So over repeated years, they do a good job.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay, anybody else? Any other questions? Looks like we're done.
Wow, I was almost 3 hours. I was close. I'm an hour
Oh,
shy,
that's
but
good. So do you have any closing thoughts, Heather?
oh, well, I really appreciate the opportunity to come and like talk about my passions because I always love to tell people what I think about things, obviously, and to share a lot of the experiences that I have. I think it's, if anything, I hope that you take the whole thoughtful and being mindful idea of what it is that whatever you do, there's going to be something that's going to happen because of what you did, and just keeping that in mind with everything that you do, because you're never going to have bare ground, and just thinking about it. And then there are so many tools out there and everything is interconnected. I realized that yesterday. I felt like I was going in circles sometimes. Like, I already talked about that. Oh, but it's important. Again, I needed to talk about it here too, because it is connected. So. But thank you guys for hearing me out.
Thank you so much. So thank you, Heather. Really appreciate you being here. Thank you all for joining us. I will be sending out the slideshow probably Monday or Tuesday. And if you have any questions, you can certainly get back to me. You have my contact information, and then you see Heather's here as well.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye.